my name's Jessie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my November wrap-up. So in the month of November, I read 4 books, just like last month. Again, I didn't have the best reading month ever, but that's okay because what I read was pretty darn good. I had some very good quality books that I'm excited to share with you guys. Before we get started on the wrap-up though, I wanted to take this second to shout out a small business that a fellow booktuber here in the community runs. Since it is the season of gift giving, we're in the holiday season, I figured it'd be cool to start sharing some of these smaller businesses that I've been coming across, especially run by those in the community. I think that's so amazing. So Kiava over at the Book Geek actually makes handmade bows that I'm going to put a picture of right here. They are so beautiful. They're all on Etsy on her shop. I love these so much. If I had a little girl in my life, I would buy all the bows. Oh my god, they're so cute. She has holiday themed ones, so you can get winter ones. She has ones for, it seems like every season. They're beautiful. I can't recommend them enough. The price point is great on them. I'm gonna link her channel down below if you're interested and still looking for some gift ideas for any of the loved ones in your life. So getting into the wrap up, like I said, I read 4 books. My rating breakdowns for those 4 books, I had 1 3-star book, 2 4-star books, and 1 4.5-star book. So pretty good quality reading month overall. For the genre breakdowns, I read 2 fantasy and 2 sci-fi. Pretty easy. And then for the age range breakdowns, all of them were adult. So pretty simple breakdown. Let's get into my thoughts, and I'm going to start with my least favorite and work my way up to my most favorite of the month. Starting with my least favorite, that was my 3-star book for the month. That was The Gone World by Tom Sweterlich. So this book was described as a sci-fi thriller that was very reminiscent of like Inception meets the True Detective TV show. And I have to say that I can definitely see why that comparison was made. This was an extremely intriguing premise and story. We follow a special agent, Sharon, who is assigned to investigate the murder of this Navy SEAL and try to find his vanished daughter. The catch with this special agent is she works in this sector that has access to what almost feels like a time machine, where they are able to jump into various points of the future and see alternate realities in this future. So sometimes they're seeing alternate realities that may not be the future of their own reality. It's just a possible future. Super intriguing premise. The catch is, with all of those futures that all of these agents travel to, they always have one common occurrence, and that is an end of the world type event that seems to be impossible to prevent. So not only are we going through and trying to solve this murder mystery and find this vanished daughter, but we're also exploring how to possibly prevent this apocalyptic type event from happening. There's a lot going on in this. I thought I was going to absolutely love this, and I have to say I did listen to it on audiobook, and I think that may have affected my enjoyment of this book because, like I said with the summary, there is a lot going on, and if your attention is diverted for even a moment, you could miss something. So I have to say, while I was listening to the audiobook, there would be times where I'd be following the story and be super invested, and then I'd get distracted, my mind would wander, and then I'd come back to it and have no idea what was going on, and I'd have to rewind it and then catch back up. So I have to say that I think I may have missed quite a bit of this story, being fully transparent with you guys, by consuming it via audio. So I'm gonna give this another try in the future because I think that this is one that I would really enjoy more reading it physically. I don't know if you all have those types of audiobooks that you listen to and think that that affected your enjoyment, but this was definitely one for me. I gotta say the beginning was so strong. If you are familiar with the TV show True Detective, especially season 1 of True Detective, I think the beginning of this book is going to immediately hook you. There's definitely this murder mystery with this strange, almost kind of like horror imagery, and it's pretty graphic at times. Like, I was pretty surprised at how graphic the details got of some of the stuff that was occurring. It was a little bit gross, but if you don't mind that kind of stuff in your thriller books, I highly recommend checking this one out. But by the middle end of this book, there was just too much going on. It was almost like it was trying to take too many ideas and shove them into one book, and this book isn't that long. I mean, I think it's like 300 something pages. So the fact that it was trying to do all of those different things in this amount of time, it just felt a little too clustered at the end. And again, that might have just been a result of me listening to this via audiobook. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. I definitely want to try physically reading it again in the future. It has a really cool premise, you guys. Such a cool premise, and the main character is really likable. She's smart, she's capable. I just love when we have really competent characters. She's independent. She's really a great protagonist to follow. So I really enjoyed reading from her perspective. It was just a little too much, too confusing, too cluttered, especially towards the end, and I wasn't a huge fan of the ending. So all that being said, 3 stars. I would still recommend this, and I'm going to personally give it a second chance for sure. The next book I have to talk about is one of my 4-star books, and that is the Dawnshard novella by Brandon Sanderson. This is the novella that comes in between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, so I definitely wanted to read this in preparation for reading Rhythm of War, and I'm really, really glad I did. The big things about this book, it is a traveling story that follows a character named Risen, who we don't really get a whole lot of perspective from in the main books, so it's really cool that we got to really dive deep into her character, and her character is disabled, so that was really, really interesting to see that representation and to see her struggles and how strong of a character was despite her struggles. I can't speak from personal experience how well he did that representation, but it seemed like he handled it with a lot of care. I know that Sorcerer Apprentice Reads actually just did a video talking about how well done that representation was. I'm going to link that down below if you want to check it out and see more of that detail. So Risen is actually assigned by me to go and investigate these strange occurrences that are happening around this mysterious island that seems to affect the Radiant's power when they come too close to it. It also affects surrounding ships, so there have been a lot of strange occurrences around this island, and Vani has tasked Risen, has teamed her up with a couple of characters that we know and love, well, some of us love, like Lopin and Rock's daughter Cord. So that was really fun to see a couple of side characters get a lot more page time in this novella. What we find out when our crew does make it to this island has huge implications, it seems like, for the entire, not only Stormlight Archive series, I definitely think it's going to play a huge role. If it doesn't in Rhythm of War, it will absolutely in future books in the Stormlight Archive universe. But it also has really large implications for just the Cosmere as a whole. So I think that this is very essential reading. I thought it was a really fun story as well. Again, I really liked getting to dive deeper into Risen as a character and get to know more about her. I loved her character and her perspective. She also has this adorable little companion called Chidi Chidi, and he is so precious. Just picture him as like a little baby dragon. It just sounds so precious. I just adore him. So that was also fun to see. I love animal companions in books. If you're asking whether or not you need to read Dawnshard before Rhythm of War, I don't think that this is required reading if you are just so eager to get into Rhythm of War and just want to go for it. I'd say that's totally fine, but I would definitely come back afterwards to read Dawnshard just because of the implications I think it has for future books and for Cosmere stuff. If you are definitely one of those readers who are trying to find all the puzzle pieces in the Cosmere and connect everything, I think Dawnshard's definitely going to need to be read. So I highly recommend reading Dawnshard before Rhythm of War, but I don't think it's required. So it's up to you if you have the time, if you want to go ahead and read Dawnshard. It's a really fun story. It follows really fun characters. I really enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars. I think it's going to be hard to get 5 stars for a novella from me, just because it's hard to leave that much of an impact with such a short amount of time. I had a good time reading it. I'm really glad I read it. I liked that it answered some questions and brought some other questions up, so it gave me everything I wanted. The next 4-star book I had was actually the Shelf Space Book Club pick for the month of November. If you didn't know, we had Elle from Elliot Brooks on my channel to discuss this November pick that we picked out for the book club, and that was Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. If you did not see that live show, I will link it down below if you want to see a lot of our spoiler-free and spoilery thoughts. We had really great discussion with everyone who joined that live show. This was so good. The premise behind this one, Sword of Kaigen, is a Japanese-inspired fantasy that follows couple main characters. The 2 perspectives that we follow are from Mamoru, who is this young 14-year-old boy who is training to be a martial artist warrior, and he has the ability to use elemental magic and manipulate snow, ice, and water, and that was really cool to explore. And then we also followed the perspective of Misaki, Mamoru's mother, who has a mysterious past and also has this ability to manipulate these elements. And they live on this pretty isolated island community called Kaigen, which essentially is a very traditional Edo-style Japanese community that truly is meant to just breed warriors who are able to manipulate the elements and fight for the Kaigenese Empire. Early in the book, we find out that Kaigen is definitely not alone in this world, and that they may have been spread some propaganda by the Empire to essentially elicit compliance from these Kaigen warriors. So their history and what they're being taught in school may not be the full story. And that was really fascinating as a starting point for a fantasy book. I really haven't seen that idea explored in any other fantasy books that I've read. And the other piece of this kind of fake propaganda may be covering up some attacks by a neighboring empire called the Reaganese that may be invading sooner than the Kaigenese people think. This book explores themes of motherhood, of grief, really explores the true costs of war. It also has a magic system that is very reminiscent of Avatar: The Last Airbender, with all of the elemental magic on full display. Overall, what I thought of this book, I really enjoyed it. And I will say I loved it, but I'm also so mad at it. And here's why. The beginning and the end of this book were pretty weak, in my opinion. I had a hard time getting into this book, but there was a certain chapter that served as a turning point for me, where I was immediately invested after that chapter and the events that occurred in that chapter. Then the middle of this book happens, and the middle of this book is top tier 5-star favorite fantasy book material. The middle of this book is fantastic. M.L. Wong is able to pull at your heartstrings and make you feel so many emotions for these characters. Her battle scenes are epic and crazy awesome. I was able to visualize everything that was going on. The elemental magic being used in the battle scenes was amazing. There was so much goodness in the middle part of this book. Oh my goodness, I was reading it and I was like, this is easily going to be 5 stars. It had me crying, ugly crying, you guys, ugly crying. It was so good. And then we get to the last chapter. Oh my god. And some people thought it started not getting as good kind of towards like the last quarter of the book. I liked the last quarter of the book up until the last chapter. The last chapter serves as M.L. Wong's opportunity to connect this standalone fantasy book to her previously published young adult series, and I didn't think it was necessary. I did not think that we needed to try to connect this book to other books. The problem is it left a lot of questions unanswered that it brought up in the last chapter. The last chapter introduced new plot threads that were never explained. It introduced new characters that we were supposed to care about because they appear in the other series. I can see why the author chose to try and connect it as a standalone book. It wasn't needed, and it made me so sad. It actually, this was something that Elle and I were talking about and sounded like it was the popular opinion by a lot of people, was the last chapter really affecting how they enjoyed this book. And it almost negated some of the themes and some of the character growth that we saw occur during the rest of this book leading up to it. It was so frustrating. So if the last chapter didn't exist, if we had ended this book just like maybe a couple scenes before that, it would have been 5 stars, probably one of my favorite fantasies ever. But unfortunately, the beginning and the last chapter were so frustrating to me. But I can't recommend this book still enough, you guys. If you haven't read it, definitely go do so. Just know that this is a standalone and this is a more contained story. So you're going to hear a lot about world building outside of this Kaigen island community, and you really don't get answers to the bigger picture of what's going on in the rest of the world. You're really only seeing it from a very limited perspective. So if you are a reader who hears about bigger epic world building but can't explore it, and that's frustrating to you, that may bother you in this book. I didn't mind it. I actually really liked this very self-contained story. I like what we got out of it. I loved the themes, the stuff that Emma Wong does well. She does exceptionally well. The positives were so positive that any sort of like negative feelings I have towards this book, I can forgive a little bit more because of how good the good stuff was. So I still highly recommend this book. Misaki will go down as one of my favorite fantasy characters, one of my favorite just female literary characters ever. She's such a badass. I love her. And overall, if you are ready to feel some emotions, prepare your heart, because this book will get you in the feels, that's for sure. The last book I read, and my favorite, and it was the 4.5-star book of the month, was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I was so pleasantly surprised by this. So the basic premise behind this book sounded so bizarre. It's essentially about this girl who lives in New York City. She's kind of up in the middle of the night walking the streets and comes upon this humongous statue of this like guy, robot thing that just seemingly appears out of nowhere, and she calls her friend over to essentially make a YouTube video introducing this statue to the rest of the world. And that video, when she wakes up, has gone viral. She is an instant celebrity for introducing this statue, because what this girl and her friends realize is the statue that appeared in New York City that night, exact copies of that statue also appeared all across the world in other huge cities. So now there is this huge plot line that happens where everyone's trying to figure out, where did these statues come from? What is the purpose of them? Who's trying to communicate? And the main character basically just started out as an average young adult girl, is kind of caught up in this bigger plot line. It was so much fun. It was definitely sci-fi, definitely more adult. I loved the characters in this book. I would definitely say that our main character is one that can be somewhat unlikable at times. She's very flawed, but I loved seeing all the different shades of her and all of her different growth and revelations throughout this book. She goes through a lot, and it's really interesting to see how fame can change someone. So this deals heavily with topics of fame, social media, It provides a lot of commentary on how social media has affected the world and how it can affect individuals who are on it. It was really fascinating and got a lot deeper than I was expecting to go. It was also just a really fun time. The writing style is really easy to get into. The pacing, it doesn't let you go once it starts. You're thrown into it and immediately hooked. I loved that about this book. It didn't take me any time to get into it, and the ending was so satisfying. I want the second book right away because the ending was so good. It definitely leaves off on a cliffhanger. This has a certain trope that I really like in books that I don't want to reveal just because I want to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Overall, I had so much fun with this. The reason I docked the half star was towards the middle of this book, there is a certain portion of this book that got very repetitive. It was kind of the same plot line being used again and again. Besides that though, it was a near perfect book. It was really fun. So if you're just looking for like a really fun, easy read that has some pretty cool themes that are especially relevant to today's teenagers and young adults and those plugged in with social media, I highly recommend this. I'm so excited to see where this story goes because again, I was so pleasantly surprised by this. So much fun. So those were the 4 books that I read in the month of November. What was your favorite book that you read in November? Leave those comments down below. I would love to know. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!